It's wild to think that I've almost covered just about all the main series Resident Evil games, but with today's video, we've done just that because Resident Evil Village is almost 4 years old now, and so it's time for me to cover it. I'm looking forward to replaying it because it's a game I enjoyed at launch but never really played again, so let's talk about it. But before I even think about it, we need to talk about Infinite Borders, who is the sponsor of today's video. Infinite Borders is a game available for mobile devices and Windows that is free to play. It is a strategy/simulation game that takes place in China's Three Kingdoms era. With the release of the new season, S1, the game is now open to players in Europe and America, and it's gripping audiences worldwide. You start the game with a plot of land and an expansive 2.25 million grid map. You gradually grow your land by protecting your own land from bandits and by taking over land under threat from bandits, gaining the materials needed to enhance your own home base. And you can even name your own unit. Mine was the Sly 4 Army because, as we all know, me and Sly 4 go way back. As I was playing, I thought it was pretty satisfying to do the little battles and get the stat boosts and upgrade the characters you have and enhance your teams and pick which figures are going to be on your team, and then grow your own home base piece by piece, until you've built your own fortress. And then you gradually unlock legendary figures to fight alongside, many of which are unique and original, boosting their stats after each battle, complete with great art design that looks pretty cool in the character portraits and the tiny cutscenes. And you can also win points for logging in daily, fighting battles, developing your territories, and helping your allies. It's possible to exchange gifts with those points, and the player who has the most amount of points can get a sculpture of Zhang Liu. The game is popular with over 10 million downloads, giving you the chance to compete with over 2,000 other players, as you can also form alliances with hundreds of players too. There are currently over 300 heroes, skills, and armies you can mix and match with, so you rarely encounter the same things again and again. So if you want to get in on this action, which I know you do, you're going to want to mosey on over to the link in the description and or the pinned comment and get started today. Thanks again to Infinite Borders for sponsoring this video. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. One of the perks of being a Resident Evil fan is that you get new content fairly regularly. Case in point, I got into this series when I finally got Resident Evil 4 off my backlog in 2020, which simultaneously feels like yesterday and a really long time ago. But yeah, I got into that game and played the RE2 remake, which I also loved. Then the RE3 remake had only just been released at that time, but right as I got into the games, the next one was announced. Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, or RE8, but regardless, the game was coming out in the spring of 2021. Resident Evil is a mostly yearly franchise at this point, so even if a game is kind of a letdown, the sting is never so bad because another one will be released right after. By the time RE8 came out, I had played enough games to where I considered myself a fan, so I pre-ordered it on Steam and played it the day it came out. I binged the whole thing in a single day, and it took me about 11 hours to get through. But then, despite the RE series being geared around replay value, I never touched Resident Evil Village again, not even when the DLC came out over a year later. I thought the game was good, but I didn't feel a strong urge to revisit it. But that's the exciting thing about this video. Now it's been almost 4 years since Resi 8 came out, and I can play it again and see how I feel about it. The game still follows Ethan Winters from Resident Evil 7. After Chris Redfield and crew rescued Ethan and Mia Winters from the Baker residence, they were placed in this witness protection setup because of the mold in their systems, and because of the knowledge Mia has from her research that she was doing before getting trapped at the Baker house. In that time, they had a daughter, Rose, who's 6 months old. But one day, Chris busts through the door and shoots Mia dead, takes Rose, and has Ethan knocked out and captured as well. Ethan wakes up in the middle of some snowy woods and finds himself in a nuttier setup than the Baker house. Wherever he is, it's a domain ruled by a woman called Mother Miranda who has taken Rose hostage for some kind of ritualistic purpose, and Ethan will stop at nothing to rescue her. But along the way, he has to fight against these monstrous servants of Miranda, Lady Dimitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Moreau, and Carl Heisenberg, which is everything you need to know to get into Resident Evil Village. Playing RE7 and 8 back-to-back really shows how much of a visual leap this game was from the previous one. While Village was released on PS4, it was designed for current-gen hardware, and that visual bump is noticeable. RE8 still uses the RE engine designed for the last game, but in execution, things like textures and hair are much higher quality. The game looks dazzling in every single area you explore, though, despite owning Village on PS5, I was playing on PC for this video for the maximum quality graphics. In hindsight, I don't know why I played the PS4 version of RE7 for that video. If I played it on PC, I probably would have felt a lot better about many of the game's visuals like the low-res textures, but alas. Like RE7, Village has kind of a long opening. My issue with the opening segment of the last game was that it was pretty scripted and linear despite going on for like a half hour. In RE8, the intro does have bits that feel linear and scripted. The first bit of gameplay is at Ethan's house, putting Rose to bed. Pretty simple, but then you have to run through the dark woods for a bit and explore the empty village. In this moment, I felt like the intro was the same, or honestly slightly worse than RE7, however, it does pick up. There's a big firefight between Ethan and these monsters that are loose in the village. It's naturally tense to be outnumbered, fighting impossible odds.
It's perfect!
And then there's your Sly Cooper reference of the day. In this combat section, I first saw that Ethan is more proficient in countering attacks than he was in the last game. Now, if you block an attack with the right timing, Ethan can push the enemy back and leave them dazed for a couple seconds, giving you an easy target to shoot. While I think the intro of RE8 is too long, especially once Ethan's trying to help these survivors in a burning building, I see the vision here in the opening combat section at least. It draws a lot of inspiration from the opening of Resident Evil 4, where you explored the isolated area for a bit and then got into a fight against an army of hostiles. But then, Resi 8 takes a lot of inspiration from RE4. That was just the beginning. Once you really start to get going with the game, you'll see how. You come across a merchant, the Duke, who sells Ethan weapons and has a shop system where you can sell treasure in exchange for currency that you use to buy gear from him or upgrade your weapons. It's pretty identical to the system from RE4. Though this merchant at least has the courtesy to sell Ethan ammo when Leon was screwed in that respect. There are other new elements to the merchant system though, like how he sells formulas for crafting your own ammo, which was not in RE4, nor was the food system where you can hunt for food and craft recipes with the Duke to achieve benefits like increased health and such. The inventory screen is also very reminiscent of RE4 though. It's a grid where different items take up differing amounts of space, and you need to manage how much space each thing takes up, and throughout the game, the Duke will sell you increased inventory space. Though, unlike Resident Evil 4, I almost never had a space problem in Village, and I was hoarding ammo and first aid like it was nobody's business. In hindsight, it's interesting to replay RE8 and see how much of it was inspired by the design choices from RE4, when the RE4 remake was also in development and was the next game, and was a perfectly faithful remake to the design from that game, even incorporating systems from RE8 like buying ammo crafting materials from the merchant. I say it's interesting because Resident Evil inventory and shop systems being done like RE4 isn't the norm. RE8 was the first one to do it, and then the RE4 remake was the next game. I mean, RE5 kind of had RE4's weapon shop system, but the inventory was very different in that game, as I went into in the RE5 video. Anyway, like I was saying, I never had an issue with the inventory space in this game, so I don't think it's as well handled as RE4, or RE4's remake even, but that isn't a knock on RE8, because the way this game forges its own identity more than makes up for the difference in the ways in which its RE4-inspired systems aren't as good as that game. Because RE8 takes elements and ideas from RE4, it still mixes it into a game that is very much a sequel to RE7, a game that was trying to take ideas from the oldest Resi games and remixing them in a new way. So, with that said, I'll now begin my usual assessment on how I think RE8 handles what I believe to be the core pillars of Resident Evil. First, resource management. Despite the Duke selling ammo in RE8, you'll never be overflowing with them because enemies have a lot of health in this game and can sway around kinda quick, making them difficult targets. You don't want to waste your shots and all that. As I have said, you can craft ammo in this game, and so when you get the materials, you need to put thought into what ammo you want and what will best benefit you in the moment and hopefully later on. The nature of the inventory screen also gets you thinking about what resources you have and don't have and want to find/make space for. In the tension category, it is as simple as this. RE8's enemies are quite ferocious and deal a lot of damage. They give you reason to be afraid of them given your limited ammo and magazine capacity. Incentivizing hunting for food to upgrade Ethan and looking for treasure to upgrade your weapons. The exploration in the main levels is consistent with RE7 where it adopts design from the classic games. You'll be in Lady D's castle and need to find the right key to get into this room and solve that puzzle to find that core item or weapon, which further allows you to explore. This element is the same as it always has been in every RE game designed like this. I especially think this game wins in the exploration category because of how the things you find in the levels will allow you to explore the main village, connecting them, and then you get secret treasures and hidden weapons for it. I only found a grenade launcher by looking around the village and finding it in a secret chest. It's well worth the repeat visits. In the main village, you'll also find super tough to beat wolf enemies that, upon defeat, drop these crystals that are worth tens of thousands of in-game currency at the merchant's shop, thus making you even more powerful as you can upgrade your weapons and buy new ones. So RE8 brings a lot to the table in the exploration category. Then the replayability is the same as most RE games. You get timed, and so there's a reason to replay the game and see how fast you can go when you know all the secrets. It also refines RE7's gameplay by letting you skip cutscenes. Thank goodness, because that was by far the worst thing about RE7. But then, while playing RE8, I had an observation that made both RE7 and 8 make a lot more sense to me. In the previous video, I had said that one of the issues I had with 7 was that the game peaked really early. The Baker House was the only level in the game I thought was really good, even if it wasn't the best the series had ever done. While most RE games have their best levels at the start, RE7 was unique in how much weaker I thought the later areas were. To the point where if I played RE7 again, I'm not even sure I'd bother playing it past the final Jack Baker boss because of how boring the endgame was. But what I realized with RE8 was that these two games are designed kind of like a series of haunted houses, as in relatively guided scares with frequent events designed to shock you on the first runaround, with some light exploration and puzzles on the way through. I just feel like these two games are the best when played blind, or relatively blind compared to other games in the series that are fun and scary the first time but even more rewarding on the revisit. But RE8 just executes much better than RE7 though. I can explain all this by going through the 4 levels. As established earlier, Lady D's castle is your typical Resi level in terms of progression and structure. But I don't think the focus of this area or the Baker House in 7 was purely on the puzzles and exploration. That, to me, feels secondary to what these games were actually about, the thrills of scary encounters. Because while I played this level, I felt like there was a lot of start and stop. Lady Dimitrescu has 3 daughters. She and the daughters will try and pursue and kill Ethan. So you'd go through a few rooms, nab something you need, and then be thrust into a boss fight or a chase sequence. It kinda got in the way of having a purely atmospheric or exploratory experience. But I feel like that's meant to be a feature and not a bug. It's undeniable that the terrified reactions players had to Jack Baker in RE7 and Mr. X in the RE2 remake had an effect on how they designed these games. Lady Dimitrescu is this game's iconic stalker villain, so the level routinely stops you to make you see how scary she is. And I don't really mind.
What the hell do...
You ungrateful, selfish wretch! You come into my house! You lay your filthy man hands on my daughters! And now you even try to steal my property! Dare! Rest while you can! Because I will hunt you, and I will break you!
On the one hand, yes, the level isn't designed like my favorite RE areas because of the start and stop, but it's also well paced enough that you do get that satisfaction out of the puzzles and exploration while also being forced into set pieces, unlike, say, the RE3 remake, which goes way too far in that direction. But ultimately, I believe I was able to enjoy this opening stage because of how I haven't played this in almost 4 years, so fighting with Lady D and her daughters in somewhat scripted sequences can still feel fresh. Where RE8 really improves on 7 is the later levels. The second level with Donna Beneviento is what a lot of people seem to point to as an example of how the replay value of Village is diminished by its approach to horror design. You first solve this really long puzzle with a doll meant to look like Mia. This I thought was satisfying enough and would be fine to speed through on a second playthrough, but the issue comes with this second half where Ethan gets chased by a fucking horrifying fetus baby monster thing. There's one solution here. You get chased and have to hide under the bed and wait for it not to see you. This is game design geared around the first playthrough because on repeat runs you know exactly what to do and have to just do it the same way. But to be fair, I think this thing is deadass the scariest RE monster. Like, I had to look away from the screen whenever it was near me, but that's in the eye of the beholder. Once more, I had a really tense go around in this area because I haven't played it in a long time. This is where I really accepted that perhaps this is just how it was meant to be enjoyed, rather than saying it's a flaw because it's not my ideal RE setup like I did in the previous video. Though, in regard to the third level, I think the word level is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. This part's pretty basic. You get chased by a fish monster for a bit and have to solve some switch puzzles along the way before getting into a fight with Moreau. But I thought the boss fight was pretty good, and I think all the bosses in RE8 are good. They have a mix of scale and scope and strategy and resource management and all that good shit. But what sealed the deal with this game executing this design model better than RE7 was the last major level, Heisenberg's factory. But before I even talk about it, I have to say that thanks to Breaking Bad memes, I can't hear the word Heisenberg without laughing. It just makes me think of Walter White tearing it up on Rainbow Road. Anyway, a level like Heisenberg's Factory is something RE7 really could have used to boost my experience with the game. Because after the good first area, the game just got more linear and restricted as it went along. In RE8, you have a good first level and 2 linear set-piece oriented ones after, but then the final major area is the biggest one in the game. The factory is a multi-floored labyrinth filled with deadly machinery and tough enemies. To get through it, you're gonna have to know the map and remember where things are in relation to what floor you're on, because you'll occasionally need to go up and down to solve everything and escape. It took me a really long time to beat it in 2021, and even now it took me like an hour. It's actually one of the more complex later RE levels, and is one of the very few examples in this series where one of the final areas is a highlight rather than kind of a formality. So in summary, I think RE7 and 8 are at their most fun when you play them blind, but RE8 wins with significantly better levels. Once you reach the top, Ethan gets sent all the way back down by Heisenberg, which is a real blow to the player until you run into Chris Redfield again, which gives me a chance to talk about this game's story some more, which is unfortunately not that much of a complimentary segue when talking about this game's version of Chris. For reasons I can explain later, I enjoyed a lot about the story of Resident Evil Village, but the one thing that hangs over everything is that Chris Redfield's a fucking idiot in RE8. But the issue is that the story needs that in order for it to happen. Like, they wanted some mysterious marketing where, ooh, Chris is evil in this game. But it just makes no sense. So, as I said up top, Chris busts into Ethan's house and shoots Mia dead, takes Rose by force, and has Ethan knocked out. To cut to the chase, it turns out that Mother Miranda captured Mia some time ago and used her powers to take her place so that she could get close to Rose, pretending to be Rose's mother so that she could form a bond with Rose before taking the baby and using her in the ritual. Once Chris found out about this, he tried to kill Miranda. But then, why would he go about it like this? When he finally explains it to Ethan, he's like, "You seriously think I'd kill Mia?" I mean, yeah, that's what it looked like. And then, he was hostile to Ethan right after and was acting like a supervillain when Ethan ran into him prior to the Moreau boss fight.
Ethan! I gotta say, I'm surprised you made it this far. It'd be a shame if something happened to you now.
Sure, Chris. Why not? You killed Mia. Now do me and finish the job!
I just don't know why Chris would even do this other than to contrive a mystery for the story. The reason he gives is that he thought if Ethan knew what Miranda was up to, Ethan was going to want to get involved in the mission. So therefore, it was somehow better to keep him completely in the dark and thinking his wife got shot and baby was abducted. That certainly wouldn't make Ethan fucking Winters get involved, the man who traveled to Louisiana to rescue Mia from the Baker house after 3 years of no contact. And what do you know? Ethan then got involved, which made Chris angry for some reason, only finally relenting and giving Ethan a weapon to use against Heisenberg. Which leads to the Heisenberg boss fight where he kills the guy, but then Ethan gets seemingly murdered by Mother Miranda. The story only lampshades how Chris caused all this in the final section where you play as him.
I know it's too late now, but we really should have told Ethan the plan.
There wasn't time. We didn't expect Miranda to act so soon.
Even so, you should have told him.
Yeah.
This part is fun because Chris just has a shit ton of ammo and wrecks guys up, but like, the writing up to this point made no sense for Chris specifically, which is pretty bad because his shooting Mia/Miranda at Ethan's house is the inciting incident of the story. That's not to say Chris is always perfect. I mean, in RE6, the whole plot was that he became a drunk after he thought he failed his unit, but I still felt like that was believable. But by the time of RE8's plot, he's been doing this war on bioweapons for over 20 years. And I don't mean in our time, I mean the game timeline. Like, Chris and Jill were in the Spencer Mansion in RE1 in 1998. Chris is here in Miranda's village in 2021. The guy has seen some serious action, I just don't know how he would ever think this was a good plan. While I'm talking about Chris Redfield, there's one nagging thing that really bothers me about his character across the entire franchise, and it would be the fact that Capcom seemingly doesn't have a lot of respect for the fact that a voice does a lot to bring a character to life. I feel like having a consistent voice can really help a character feel in character regardless of what's happening. But Christ, Chris Redfield might be one of the most recast characters in gaming history. I'm not gonna say Capcom doesn't respect the actors as people. I don't work for them, I don't know. And I'm not saying that the recasts do a bad job. Far from it. In fact, in RE8, Chris is voiced by Jeff Shine, who also played Carlos in the RE3 remake. It's easy to recognize, but you can tell he's playing two different people, and he's good as Chris. I just think constantly switching up the voices of the characters kind of sucks, because it's like the audience is constantly being reintroduced to the same character over and over again.
I'm Chris Redfield from the Alpha team. Are you the only person here from the Bravo team?
I came here looking for a certain girl. Have you seen anyone named Claire Redfield?
Chris Redfield, Alpha Team. We're here to rescue you.
Just Chris, thanks. So you'll be accompanying me to the destination?
I got a job. We need your help.
No. Ethan Winters has been secured. He's alive and well, considering.
3 years trying to put this thing in the ground. 3 years too long.
In the earlier games, it made sense. I'm not saying the Chris from RE1 or Code Veronica needed to be the longtime voice, but like, Roger Craig Smith from RE5 and 6, he was great, and it seemed like that was just how Chris's voice was going to be going forward, only for us to get the RE7 Chris who genuinely feels like a completely different character. The voice cast in RE7 and 8 and the remakes of 2 through 4 have been pretty consistent. You know, it's the same Ethan and Mia in RE7 and 8, and it's the same Leon in RE2 and 4 remakes. So they've been more consistent lately, which I hope stays that way because these current actors have been pretty involved with the community and really love doing it. I'd hate to see them get replaced again. Though they did recast Chris between RE7 and 8, and they also recast Ada between the RE2 and 4 remakes, so I guess no one's truly safe in this business, but I'm just saying, I hope Capcom doesn't do it again. Anyway, in the final act, we learn what's going on in this game. Miranda is this super old person, but she's kept herself alive with various experiments. The reason she tries to keep living is because her daughter passed away young like 100 years ago, so she's been trying with all her might to bring her daughter, Eva, back. In fact, Miranda corresponded with Oswald Spencer back before he formed the Umbrella Corporation. Her research was too limiting for him since she only cared about bringing Eva back, but she did inspire him to make Umbrella and start the research on bioweapons that led to the T-virus that kicked off the whole series. All the villains Ethan had to fight, like Lady Dimitrescu and Heisenberg, were failed experiments attempting to find a vessel to bring Eva back. They just became enforcers for Miranda instead. It also turns out that the reason for Evelyn's existence in RE7 was that she was another attempt at bringing Eva back, which didn't quite succeed because of how unstable Evelyn was. This is where the Winters family comes into the picture. Ethan and Mia were both infected with the mold during their time at the Baker house. Miranda and her megamycete is where the mold comes from, and it's using that which will help her bring Eva back. Ethan and Mia's exposure to it somehow has rested in their DNA, and therefore Rose has superhuman abilities while not being unstable like Evelyn was. That's why Rose is the target. After you finish playing as Chris, you even get an explanation for why Ethan is so hilariously durable, and it's because of the mold. Evelyn appears to Ethan in a dream and explains that his ass got killed by Jack Baker within the first 30 minutes of RE7. But then the mold he was exposed to was how he got his hand back, and how in RE8 he just survives a ridiculous amount of shit, up to and including his arm getting cut off and him literally putting it back on. Now, how you could explain Ethan's durability in his fight with possessed Mia before he got killed? Well, that clearly can be explained by the fact that he just has unstoppable spirit and will to live, I guess. The mold is how Ethan is even continuing to live now after Miranda took his heart out. I went into all those details because, like I said, I think RE8's story is largely enjoyable. The villains are entertaining and have believable motivations, and RE8 does a great job recontextualizing RE7 and turning the two games into a really strong narrative duo about the mold and Evelyn and the Winters family. RE8 really making Ethan one of the coolest badasses in the series. You know, Chris and Jill and Leon and Claire were all these action movie badasses, many of whom had super agent training to make them so capable. But Ethan's so cool because he's just a dude who's motivated by nothing more than a want to protect his wife and daughter. Now, he has mold-powered regeneration, but he didn't at the start of 7, and he still showed up anyway. That, to me, makes him a cool character, especially at the end here. Ethan's on the brink of death, and he still takes the fight to Miranda to save Rose. And on my first playthrough, I got my butt royally handed to me in the final boss, so I stocked up a bunch of ammo for it here and cleared it first try, as Ethan becomes more unstable with Miranda dead and the megamycete destroyed. Ethan sacrifices himself so that Chris can take Rose to safety, which is one of the first times where an RE game made me genuinely feel kind of emotional. Because Ethan deserves a happy ending, but he's willingly sacrificing himself because that's what needs to be done. RE8 ending on the note of Rose as a 16-year-old girl honoring her father at his grave, which was a sweet ending for the game at the time of its release, but has become more so with time. Resident Evil 8 wasn't going to get DLC like RE7 did, but by popular demand, we got post-launch content for Resident Evil Village. The Mercenaries mode returned, and we even got a third-person mode where you can play RE8 from a third-person perspective, like, say, the remakes of RE2 through 4. It's kinda weird to me, to be honest. I'm just so used to RE7 and 8 being directly from Ethan's point of view that seeing it like this is really weird. The cutscenes also return to Ethan's POV, so I feel like it's just better to play in first person. But that's up to you, it's the same game either way. But the most important bit of post-game content is the Shadows of Rose storyline. This fleshes out the original ending by letting players take control of 16-year-old Rose. She's a social outcast because of her horrifying powers, and she learns that she can get rid of them by finding a purifying crystal that lives inside the only remaining fungal root from the giant one that Ethan and Chris destroyed in the main story. Rose uses her powers to mentally go inside of it, and you get a campaign of some remixed level design from the main game, only you play as Rose. During the portion that takes place in Lady D's castle, I didn't think much of this mode. It was alright. I guessed that Ethan's spirit was Rose's guardian angel from moment 1, but still, it was decent. But then I changed my tune the more I played of this. In the Beneviento house section, things got really interesting. Gameplay-wise, there's this one great part where you have to get through this room, but if you take your eyes off these mannequin dolls, they'll follow you and kill you. It's simple, but their movement is so uncanny, and seeing their glowing eyes in the dark was terrifying. When I saw one of those things walking towards me for the first time, I am genuinely admitting I actually screamed. But then the story ramped up here too, as Evelyn's spirit lives in this realm too, not just Ethan's, as Ethan tries to save Rose from Evelyn. But the story here just got me feeling sympathetic for many of the characters. Rose, naturally, because she's been considered a freak by other kids for reasons that are totally out of her control, something that Evelyn keeps putting in Rose's face here. But then, all these games make me feel really bad for Evelyn too. Ethan's closing remark in RE7 was that everything here was Evelyn's fault, not the baker's, which was true. But Evelyn didn't choose to be a lab rat. All she wants now is just parents who care about her, but she goes about it in these destructive, villainous ways. Her behavior makes her the villain, but you do understand why she would hate Rose in this section. Evelyn wanted Mia and Ethan to be her parents, but they didn't want her and fought to escape her control. And now they have their own actual daughter they care about. It makes sense why someone like Evelyn would hate Rose. It's sad in a way because this whole thing is a plot by Miranda, who also lives in the fungal root. Miranda wants her kid back, and Evelyn wants a mother. They're both right there, but can't give each other what they want, because Miranda sees Evelyn as a failed attempt to bring her original daughter back and cares nothing for anyone who fails their purpose in that sense. The final act of this DLC managed to make me emotional again, because Rose does get rid of her powers, but it was Miranda's plan to depower Rose so she could be used to bring Eva back. Ethan fighting to no avail to save Rose, who then destroys the purifying crystal so she can get her powers back and save Ethan and kill Miranda for good. And at the end, she gets one-on-one time with her long-deceased father. This conversation between them was genuinely heartfelt, one of the most emotional moments in the series for me, which isn't a high bar, but still. Guess I'm just a sucker for this kind of storyline. Though it's kind of comedic how the scenes are shot so specifically that they never show Ethan's face. Since that's the running gag with RE7 and RE8 is that you'll never see Ethan Winters' face. It's kind of funny, but it does take you out of the moment a little bit. Might have been a nice dramatic reveal to show Ethan's face once and for all in his very final scene. But either way, Shadows of Rose ends with the same gravestone ending as the main game, but now, thanks to the DLC, it's more emotional, since you just have more connection to Rose as a character and have seen why visiting her dad now means as much to her as it does, since she did get to meet him after all. Which is a very satisfying ending for Resident Evil Village, a game that I thought was pretty cool. That's pretty much the only way I can summarize the game though, which is exactly what I said about it in 2021. I remember being asked what I thought of it by a friend, and I was like, yeah, that was a good game, which sounded kinda negative since my reaction to RE2 Remake or later RE4 Remake was, oh my god, this is incredible. But no, I don't mean anything disparaging about RE8 in saying I think it's good. I enjoy it. Like, it doesn't execute the core principles of Resident Evil like the best of any game, but no one game has all four elements at their peak anyway. The fact that in my eyes RE8 is good at all of them is worth something. I don't plan on revisiting it anytime soon, but when I do, I'm gonna enjoy it. The levels are fun and tense, the story has good emotional moments, the visuals are stunning even years later. The game is quite good. If I had to do an RE tier list, RE8 would be in the B tier, which for me means it's a good game, no questions asked. Not the greatest game I've ever played, but I like it. And I think it's well worth your time if you're an RE fan or not. I know someone who loved it and played it for several playthroughs back to back, so it's a case where your mileage may vary, but I think it's a good game. And what more could you want? That said, this pretty much ends my review series in the RE games until the next one comes out, but like I said at the start, we probably won't be waiting long for that. I'm sure the next game is right around the corner, whether that's RE9 or a Code Veronica remake or whatever the heck, I'll be there to play it. And in the meantime, there are still other RE projects I'd like to do. More details to come in the future, but as you know, I didn't cover RE Revelations or Revelations 2, or talk about RE Survivor or any of that stuff. So there's more to say about these games, and that will come in due time. But now, it's time to close the video, so I'll end it by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.